First off, I need to draw your attention to the disclaimer. So this presentation is for educational purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice.
So I'll go straight into some case studies because these help you to see what we've just learned in action, and it will help you to understand a little more of how it all plays out in real life. And I'll start off with my own breast cancer journey, which many of you may already be familiar with if you've read my website. So here's a quick timeline of the journey I had. So there's my information at the top. I had no official diagnosis. I referred myself to thermography because I didn't want any invasive diagnosis. So in July 2016, I found a large lump which was puffy in appearance and I had no symptoms otherwise. There was, I went for thermography. The activity around the lump suggested it was probably cancerous. As soon as I got the results, in August, I followed a ketogenic diet and took a variety of supplements, all of which I muscle tested for. In November, I had a follow-up thermography. This showed a reduction of activity. I had extreme fatigue and a really bad candida infection, which I treated with a chitin inhibitor. 2017, I noticed an increase in the lump, so I went for thermography again, but it showed activity. January to June, I experienced pain, swelling, and discomfort in my breasts, and this caused me a degree of panic and anxiety. June 2018, then, I could no longer feel the lump. So then August, I went for another checkup thermography scan, but this time it showed a 5, which is the highest risk. Now this caused me intense, lasting anxiety, and that lasted several months. So I haven't been back since. So we'll look at this journey now from the GNM perspective. So to find the conflict, because I didn't have an official diagnosis, I needed to find out if the lump was related to the glands or the ducts. In GNM, there are only 2 types of breast cancer. That's glandular and intraductal. The hormone positive, negative, and all the other things that they offer with a diagnosis only indicates where in the program that you are. As I had no official diagnosis, what I had to do was try and identify this from the symptoms that I was having. So there's the compass now to remind you of it. So I overlaid then the 2 programs to see the differences and to see what was relevant. So the symptoms in bold are ones that are memory loss there, and there's fungal bacterial activity there. Those are kind of like key things that are different. Intraductal breast cancer has cell proliferation in the healing phase, where there are symptoms. And in the conflict active phase, there is short-term memory loss and loss of nipple sensitivity. Glandular breast cancer has cell proliferation in the conflict active phase, here, where there are no symptoms. And then it has these symptoms, including fungal bacterial activity in the healing phase. So as I had a lump but no symptoms, apart from some inflammation because of the puffiness, that suggested to me that the tumour had formed in the conflict active phase. Also, I had no memory loss, or I couldn't remember if I did anyway, or loss of nipple sensitivity. And I had a candida infection. So the candida is a fungus, so this all ties in with the glandular breast program. So the glandular breast cancer is triggered by a nest-worry conflict. Now, looking at the timeline and the conflict, I realized quite quickly that this was to do with selling our family's home. The purpose of the cell proliferation is to increase the surface area of the breast glands so as the breast can produce more milk, so all of the people of the nest will be nourished in times of hardship. As I am right-handed, it was on my maternal line, so I knew the worry was concerning mother, child, or the nest itself, so it all ties in with the family home. So this is the timeline where I've added in red the additional relevant information. So February 2015, we had a very stressful house move. We sold our family home and we had to move to a temporary home. The DHS occurred when I decided I did not want to sell and it was too late to stop. And I remember very specifically that moment. November 2015, there was a resolution as we moved to a farmhouse and I really finally felt at home there. In July 2016, a large lump was found. So if you think of the program, it had been growing all that time and then it had started getting inflammation. Puffy in appearance, which was the inflammation. There were no symptoms yet. The activity and the inflammation suggested that the healing had begun. So I went on the ketogenic diet and took a variety of supplements. Now, luckily, I muscle tested these, so I knew they were all supportive. I didn't understand GNM at the time. I might have done things differently had I not muscle tested and found out what my body wanted to do. We had problems with trading standards, because I was mentioning this journey on my website. And that in turn led to some financial stress, and we had to move from the farm. And my granddad died all at the same time. And this all would have slowed or prevented healing because it obviously was taking me out of the non-stress that my body needed for healing. In November 2016, the thermography reduction of activity. And we thought this was really good. We were like celebrating. But actually, it just meant that the healing had stopped due to the stress. December then, that fatigue and candida meant that the healing was finally happening. However, I treated it with a cheating inhibitor. No! January to July then, 2017, I was planning my daughter's wedding, so I had a big distraction. And August 2017 had further problems with trading standards. There were several raids. I was actually appeared in the mainstream media under a few hit pieces, and I had these accusations, and there was people posing as potential clients phoning me to try and trap me into say something that I shouldn't. The stress of that year, good and bad, slowed and prevented further healing. This is why the program is so long. So in October 2017, I noticed an increase in the lump. The thermography showed there was no additional activity. The increase in size was due to inflammation, which showed that the healing was about to recommence. In December 2017, we had a trading standards resolution as we put a case forward claiming victimization, and the officer was removed of her duties. In June 2018, I experienced pain, swelling, and discomfort in my breast, particularly my left, and these are all healing symptoms. But obviously, because I didn't understand, that's why they caused me panic. June 2018, there was the disappearance of the lump. And August 2018, the checkup thermography showing a 5 risk. This was just showing healing phase B, or the scarring process. I mean, when you think it's like a construction site there's going to be activity. So that would have saved me months and months of really bad stress and anxiety. So as you can see, it's a completely different story from a GNM perspective. I'm really grateful that I used kinesiology muscle testing, as this ensured that everything I was doing was in harmony with what my body needed at the time, as I mentioned. Apart from the candida treatment, because I did not muscle test for that. I just panicked when I realized I had candida. I just wanted to get rid of it, so I didn't muscle test for that. And here's my journey on the kind of compass there, so you can see how it played out. So, and this is handy to do as well if if you have like a healing program, to set it out like this so you can see exactly what's going on and things. So next, this is a reflexology client of mine, and it's a really good clear-cut case of a hanging healing. So she's a female, right-handed, around 50 years old. Her symptoms were arthritis and inflammation in her left big toe, and she's had that for 10 years. The prognosis and diagnosis was arthritis, and it's incurable. And the conflict is a self-devaluation conflict. So after we were chatting, I got this information. So she said it had never been the same since the dog stamped on her foot and injured it. It was worse at the start of each week, which was Sunday evening and Monday. She visited her friend with the dog every weekend, and she admitted that she had a fear of the dog hurting her toe again. So this statement, "it's never been the same since," is a really strong indication of the cause or trigger of the condition. In this case, the conflict is localized, as it is where the original conflict occurred, or injury. And so the right-left rule would not apply. The dog, to me, was obviously a track, because she was conflict active when she didn't have symptoms when she was away for the weekend with the dog, because she said it was fine. She would walk up mountains and things, and it was fine. The conflict resolved then when she came home and left the dog. This is when the healing would start and the symptoms would flare up. Not seeing the dog then for a week would allow the program to complete, and it was better before she went again. But it kept recurring every weekend, because obviously that she was seeing the dog, and the dog was a track. So my advice was to her, do not use anti-inflammatories unless absolutely necessary, because inflammation is required for healing. Rest and only move within the pain. Be careful of thoughts not to devalue it further, especially thinking, well, this is never going to get better. And neutralize the track, which was seeing the dog. So I presented this as an ongoing case at a GNM talk I did for clients, and this client was there. And when I presented it as an ongoing case, she said, actually, that weekend after we had the chat, it never happens again. And it hasn't cleared up since, and this was like this had been a few months. So this is a great example of how simply understanding the conflict can allow the healing to complete. So next, we have a painful shoulder. This is Lloyd, and male, right-handed. Symptoms: persistent pain and stiffness in left shoulder and neck. The conflict to do with these symptoms is an intellectual self-devaluation conflict, which is his neck, and a relationship self-devaluation conflict in his shoulder. This can also be experienced as a loss of self-worth. So the information on what he experienced, it was persistent for 3 months, and it was quite bad, wasn't it? Stopped you sleeping and everything, didn't it? It eased during the evening, usually around 6 p.m., but it was worse then overnight and in the morning. So he's right-handed, and he had a left-sided complaint. So it is either localized, in other words, something related to that area, or is mother-child related for him. The time also stuck out to me. So if it gets better at that time, what does this tell us? What it actually tells us is, because it got better, he was conflict active at that stage. Yeah? Does that make sense? But like the dog, she was okay when she was away for the weekend with the dog. Conflict activity, there's no symptoms, so it appears to get better. Then it would resolve, and it would get worse. So the healing symptoms would start, it would get worse. then overnight and in the morning. So we looked at what happened at that time every day related to something he did, either associated with shoulders and neck or related to mother-child in a way that was causing intellectual self-devaluation and loss of self-worth. So this is the time that Connor, our son, comes home from work. Any stresses concerning Connor? Well, he had finished an apprenticeship in June. This was 3 months previous. And he was still being paid apprenticeship wage, despite being fully qualified. Every night Connor walked in from work, and even if he wasn't complaining, you could sense that he was really stressed and unhappy. Lloyd would ask anxiously as soon as he came in, "Did they sort your wage?" This showed me, and I actually said at the time, you're so stressed about this. It was causing you an awful lot of stress. So here's the explanation. So having not been valued by his company by being paid the full wage, which is loss of self-worth, and acknowledged for finishing his apprenticeship, intellectual self-devaluation, Lloyd was actually experiencing this self-devaluation conflict on behalf of Connor. And this is what's known as an empathic DHS. This is actually proof of how we can take on other people's problems. And it may also explain why empathic people, such as me, often get ill. So the solution, well, first of all, just understanding the conflict significantly improved the pain because there was no resistance or fear. And this allowed the healing to happen and not adding self-devaluation any further. You see, when we experience pain, we would normally think, there's something wrong with me here. And we would get fearful and frustrated, and this worsens self-devaluation. But when we understand what's happening, we can release that resistance and fear and allow the healing to take place. He then neutralized the track of Connor coming home. So he changed the focus. For example, asking him as soon as he came in, "What do you want for tea?" or "How has your day been?" rather than, "Did you get your full wage?" And the pain went completely within 2 days of Connor receiving his full wage. So this one's quite complex, and this is me again. It's persistent athlete's foot, which was on and off for 12 years. The associated conflict is an attack conflict because the athlete's foot involves the corium skin. In this instance is particularly disfigurement and feeling soiled. So the inflammation, I tried every fungal treatment. I even resorted to non-natural treatment. It was better with barefoot and cold. And I actually used to stand on ice to numb my feet to stop the extreme itchiness. I had a strong urge to clean, especially between toes during flare-ups. It was worse just before my period, so I was thinking, is this hormonal? I had flare-ups from wearing shoes, in particular enclosed shoes, and I had flare-ups after a bath or shower. So the conflict theme is an attack, as I mentioned. So this could be physical, verbal, fear of attack, that sort of thing. The corium skin responds to any perceived attack by cell proliferation to thicken the protection barrier. Then fungi assist in breaking down the extra cells and healing, hence the athlete's foot. So when did this start? What happened around that time? Well, 12 years ago, I had a large stomach operation, and surgery can be perceived as an attack. So I muscle tested to confirm that this was related, because it just seemed like, how can a stomach operation trigger off my feet? Didn't make sense, but the muscle testing was positive, so I had this to go on with. So having now had the trigger, I had to realize the tracks to stop the reoccurrences that kept happening. So to identify the tracks, I look for what eases it, because what eases it could be putting it back into conflict active, as it would make symptoms go. What worsens it could be a resolution, as it caused healing symptoms. And this is, I'll cut a long story short. I'm not going to go into the whole investigation because it took me ages. So the DHS was stepping onto the hospital floor the day after the operation with bare feet. First of all, I stepped on my left foot. It touched the cold floor, and the nurse called out, "Don't walk barefoot on this floor. You don't know what you'll pick up." This triggered a feeling soiled conflict. So the tracks were barefoot, which, because when I put shoes on, it would cause healing. Cold, because the cold would stop the symptoms. And bathing resolved the conflict. So this is why baths would trigger the flare-ups. Then came DHS 2. I realised this when I neutralised the tracks, and my left foot had got better, but my right didn't. So I must have had 2 DHSs. So, stepping out of bed with my right foot, I go to stand up, and this is a big operation, mind, it goes right across, and they'd removed a lot of it, and I couldn't straighten up. I had to use a frame because my skin was like much too tight. I remember thinking, oh no, they've butchered me. I am deformed. What am I going to do? I will never be able to stand up straight again. This triggered a disfigurement conflict. So the tracks are barefoot again. Each time I see my scar in the mirror, and also recurring infections in the scar, because I got one of those blinking meshes that gives you infections all the time. So every time I get an infection, it triggers my feet. And to top it off, an additional track of the few days leading up to my period. It's because this is when both of my feet would go absolutely crazy. So as I mentioned, I thought this was hormonal, but I remembered that I started my period about 2 days after the operation. So this explains why my feet would apparently randomly play up, one and then the other, and then sometimes both. Now, this all seems a bit extreme, just like putting your foot on the floor and this triggering off this 12-year-long thing, you know. But it's a good example of how our susceptibility to experiencing a DHS can increase when we are stressed and already have a lot going on. At the time, I would have been very susceptible to DHS. I was stressed, uncomfortable, away from home, hospitalized, so I probably had some of that going on as well. And I had just been through a really big operation. So the solution, as the tracks became apparent, I began to neutralize them. I'm going to go into that a little bit more later on. I stopped using antifungal treatments as I realized the fungus is part of the healing. I didn't touch or clean between my toes when I felt compelled to, and I distracted myself during a flare-up. And the result, it is a bit ongoing, but it's massively improved. I can now wear closed-in shoes. I have no flare-up in my period. Flare-ups are greatly reduced in length, severity, and frequency. But I'll just add that I neutralized the feeling soiled conflict by walking out barefoot in the morning dew. And this was to create a positive, clean and fresh association with bare feet, cold, and the cold as well. And this worked brilliantly. And then sometime later I was putting out washing in barefoot one day, and I stood in dog poo after I cleaned my feet, and then I had a flare up. So there we go. So next I'm going to look, I mean, obviously this is not a case study of mine, but I wanted to look at this because it sort of really gives a sad example of how it is assumed that cancer is metastatic and the devastating implications that it can have. I haven't got, obviously, his medical records, but I've looked for all the information that I can. And so I've based this sort of case study on a potential of what could have, how this could have played out for him. So he repeatedly injured his right big toe, and he was very passionate about playing football. He was diagnosed with acral melanoma 4 months after the last injury to his toe that wouldn't heal in 1977. He was advised to have his toe removed, meaning he could never play football again. The cancer metastasized to his stomach, lung, liver, and brain. He was given alternative treatment, including an elimination diet, in 1980. He was hospitalized and given chemotherapy several months before he died. He finally died from a brain tumor in 1981. So let's have a look at how this could have played out. Repeated injuries to his big toe, which was his kicking foot, caused an attack conflict that would have triggered the corium skin program and the melanoma. He was so passionate about playing football that the idea of having his toe removed and not being able to play football again caused an indigestible morsel conflict, making it appear that the cancer had spread to his stomach. News of aggressive spreading caused a death-right conflict affecting his lungs and a territorial anger conflict affecting his liver, his territory being his body, anger that his territory was being invaded by this cancer. He distracted himself with music and travel, which allowed healing, but then he got severe symptoms, which is why he was put into hospital. Chemotherapy and reduced protein diet, because he was Rastafarian, so that he was vegan, so he would have had a reduced protein diet, were contra to the healing phase, and I'm going to come on to that later. Hospitalization caused the syndrome, which increased the healing brain edema, the swelling around the healing cells in the brain, and caused it to be fatal. So remember, the healing will take place simultaneously at the organ and the brain level. So the brain cancer is not cancer, it is healing. And this is why it doesn't have an associated conflict. So I'll pass you on to Lloyd.
Okay, so it's a fatal heart attack, which was shared by a friend in the audience at our first talk in GNM. Sadly, it was fatal, but in this case, I think it's clear-cut and an example of GNM in practice. We had to deduce the hormone status due to his age. We deduced that he was right-handed, and we worked that out as a biological program would be controlled in the cerebral cortex and involve the male territorial loss affecting coronary arteries. If he had been left-handed, he would have experienced a pulmonary embolism, as the program would have been run in the opposite brain relay, which is the coronary veins. Okay, so male in his 50s, we determined the right-handed, fatal heart attack out of the blue, and he'd been drinking at the same local pub for 20-odd years. He had an argument with the landlord and was barred for a year. He remained extremely stressed about the ban throughout, and when he saw his friends, he'd be going on about it all the time, apparently. Then the landlord retired and a new landlord lifted the ban. But unfortunately, 3 weeks after that, he died of a massive heart attack. So I think you can see now that, this is the thing with, and Dr. Hammer said, if this type of conflict goes on after 9 months, it can be fatal. So it's something that is very cautionary about. So basically, he experienced a territorial loss conflict when he was barred, and this resolved when the ban was lifted. But as it was active for more than 9 months, it's the epicrisis that happened after the 3-week period that was the fatal. The importance of resolving the conflict early and not staying conflict active for the length of time. Even if you can, if this case, you can just downgrade it, and we'll talk about that later as well. These are feedback we had when we were on Richard's show. My wife's stepfather suffered from pancreatic cancer and died 6 months after diagnosis. I don't know much about the case except 6 months before diagnosis he got punched hard in the stomach by his son during family issues, and his wife had always suspected this as being the trigger for the cancer. So to explain that, it would have likely been an indigestible morsel conflict, and the indigestible morsel conflict relating to the pancreas is typically brought on by arguments with family members. And while almost all of the feedback from the show was very good, we did have a couple who denied that it applied to them or people that they know. However, when we looked at what they said, it was obvious to us they didn't look at any further into GNM than what they saw on the show, or they hadn't understood certain aspects of it, still thinking from the old perspective and trying to make it fit in with their way of thinking. So here's one good example we think was a misinterpretation of GNM. So the viewer said, a woman in her 70s who never met her father, who had died in World War II, had a major shock when learning that he was apparently some kind of serial murderer. 4 months later, aggressive cervical cancer was diagnosed, with at least one lymph node in the vicinity cancerous. I know her well, and it definitely was not a sexual conflict. Well, we agree. So here is the explanation from the GNM perspective. If you remember the temporal lobe again, due to it being post-menopause in her 70s, it would have more likely then been a territorial loss and not a sexual conflict that she experienced due to the changed hormone status. Territorial loss would certainly make sense in this situation, and territorial loss is the loss of a member of the territory. It could be parent, spouse, partner, child, pet, friend, that sort of thing. Often because of an argument or disagreement. Also the loss of reputation or belief within the territory, and that would have been highly relevant in this case. The lymph is triggered by a moderate self-evaluation conflict, often triggered by a diagnosis or fearing something is wrong in that area. Now, additionally, we can also deduce that this lady in the story who was in her 70s would have had to have been left-handed to have had the cervical cancer, unless she hadn't gone through the menopause yet, which is doubtful at 70. Just a couple more quick ones. In January 2019, my dad was diagnosed with bowel cancer, a thoroughly healthy man in his mid-70s. We just went through the motions and he received treatment to have a tumour cut out. Several weeks later, he was then diagnosed with lung cancer. It seemed impossible that he had never smoked in his life and was furiously anti-smoking. Thinking back, he had a terrible car accident 3 months before his bowel cancer episode, and it was roughly 3 months after that we learned of the lung cancer. So the viewer then can see the direct relationship between the crash causing the bowel cancer, which then resulted in the lung cancer. Hopefully you had better an idea now and begin to realize this quote by Danielle is actually very true. And is your body's ability to heal itself is far greater than you have ever been allowed to believe.
From now on, this is our perception of GNM. These are tips that we've put together through our own experiences, our own studies, our own research. So from now on, it's with GNM principles. It's not official GNM, okay? Because GNM does not exclude the addition of other modalities, treatments, and therapies at all. And many work alongside GNM, but in a very effective way. But the important thing to remember is the 5 biological laws are always used as a basis for anything that we do. So we must always be thinking of these laws and whether what we are doing is in harmony with these or acting against them. So here's something we've put together. This is based on my own practice, nutritional therapy and kinesiology and various other therapies. This is based upon also my clients' experiences, my own experiences, families and friends' experiences, and also our 16 years of research into natural health and detox. And I'll stress as well that in the way that we have structured this information is not officially GNM. But we hope it's a way of presenting it in a way that is hopefully easy to remember and understand. So first we will look at what to do when you've had a diagnosis or had symptoms. So you need to trust GNM and your body. So T is trust the process. R, relax and don't panic. U, understand complex. S, support healing. And T, look at tracks if it's a recurring problem. So we'll look at each of these steps in more detail. So first we need to trust the process. And here are some statements and points that helped me to trust in GNM when I began using this approach in my own healing journey. They are little reminders that helped me in moments of doubt when I felt anxious and slipped back into the fear-based old way of thinking, which is really easy to do when you've got symptoms. So remind yourself, Dr. Harmer's very impressive success rate, 92% or 98%, and all had full recovery. Remind yourself of Dr. Harmer's discoveries that are found without exception, meaning there is no hypotheses, no theories, and no assumptions. Remember that everything in nature exists in harmony. Why wouldn't it? Remember that the advice that we receive, whether conventional or alternative, is based on the incorrect premise that cancer and disease are malfunctions that need intervention. Bring yourself back to the laws if you get carried away with other people's theories, and then you can see what's relevant. Our bodies possess innate wisdom and are perfectly tuned biological computers. So next we need to relax and not panic. This is really important, and I know it is more easily said than done, as we've all had years of conditioning to dissolve and work through. So the reminders in the first section helped me a lot. In addition, here are some things that we helped find us to relax and not panic. So understand what to expect, to remove the fear or concern over what is happening. This is important as fear creates stress and resistance. And when we know what to expect, we can relax a little more and allow the healing. Embrace the symptoms as the healing that they are, feeling relieved that the conflict has been resolved. So thinking of symptoms as healing is a shift in awareness that can take time, as it is so easy to fear symptoms, especially when they are uncomfortable or a symptom of something that you once considered serious. Now if I have symptoms, I think, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that could be about. Thank goodness something is resolved. Distract yourself with something that you love and you can immerse yourself into, such as a hobby that you enjoy, work, reading, or even helping others. Now, I say work, and when we are ill, we're often told, you shouldn't be working, you should be resting. But if your work is something that you can really immerse yourself into, and you really enjoy it, then that's great. The same applies to helping others. When we're told we shouldn't be helping others, you should be helping yourself. But as long as it's not detrimental to ourselves to help others, and it makes us thrive, then that is fine. We often need a distraction so we can let go of the thoughts and worry of what is going on in our body. As long as you are not doing anything stressful or stimulating, again, you need to come back to the laws and decide what is supportive. Basically, just do something that you love, that promotes good feelings, something that feels comfortable to you, as these feelings are supportive to healing. Adopt positive thinking, body appreciation, and carefully written positive affirmations, which can help us to avoid self-devaluation. This can be simply counting your blessings, focusing on what you are grateful for about yourself and your body, or you can do some guided meditations. I've actually just posted a free one on my YouTube, a half-an-hour body connection meditation, if you wanted to check that out. There's something important to understand when you write affirmations, as they need to be carefully written so they do not create a track or trigger old conflicts. This can cause a hanging conflict, hanging healing, or it can even trigger an old DHS. If you keep affirmations positive, in the present, unfocused on a particular area or issue, and simple, I have found that they work very well with myself, clients, and others I've helped. I'll give you some examples of some positive affirmations. So you understand your conflict. Understanding your conflict really helps the healing process. And as you have seen in some of the case studies, sometimes that's all that we need to do. So first we need to identify our conflict theme, which you can do by going to the learninggnm.com website or by consultation with a GNM practitioner or therapist who works with GNM. You may need to compare different biological programs that are running in the part of the body that is affected, like I did with the breast lump. It may be easiest to set out the programs on a comparison chart that reflects the compass. And here is an example. So you could put, say, you've got a program running in an organ with multiple germ layers, which you'll find out from the Learning GNM website when you look it up. Then you can write each program down and see which germ layer would be involved by comparing by the experiences you're having. And this is an example of one I filled out to compare skin programs. So a rash can be identified as involving the epidermis or the corium underskin. So what I've done, the same as with the breast comparison, is I've put key symptoms in capitals and in bold, so as they really stuck out to me. Now, when I had the rash, and like it was the really sort of burny, stingy feeling, and there was the fungal activity going on, I knew that it was obviously corium skin. Fungus doesn't even exist on the epidermis. I also hadn't had any memory loss, so I knew it was a corium skin program. So next we need to determine what or who is involved. So then you would look at right, left side and things like that. And then think about what was going on in your life from shortly before your symptoms started to any time in the maybe 6 to 8 months or even more before the start of your symptoms. You will likely know fairly quickly, or you may just even have a feeling what the trauma is, especially if you think ever since this happened. So then it is just a case of realizing the actual conflict so you know how you perceive the situation. Recognizing conflicts also helps you to really get to know yourself. It's like understanding your buttons and what pushes them. So for example, since my breast journey, I've actually had multiple cases of corium skin programs, I guess you'd call it shingles, in areas, including the area where I have the lump and at lymph node points. This tells me that I have a subconscious theme of feeling attacked by something. This is hardly surprising due to the raids and press attention that happened around the time of this healing program with the trading standards and all of that stuff going on. And I've since realized that I've perceived other things in this way, feeling like I'm under attack when I look at it logically, I'm not. So it sort of really helps you to get to know how you view things where you might not realize it. So you also need to understand the program you are in and where you are on the compass. So once you have determined the relevant program, it may help if you set out biological programs so you can look at the program and see what to expect. So here's an example of a template, something like this you could use. You just obviously fill out like I did as well with the breast thing. And this is a kind of bit of a warning, really, and it's really, really important. Always remember, if you are having symptoms, the conflict has been resolved. And I really need to stress this. Discovering your DHS and talking about it will bring the subconscious into the conscious mind, where we can bring logic and reasoning into the equation. That is often all you need to do. No digging, dwelling on it. Just remember it's been resolved. So there's no more work to do in that sense. If you keep going over it, there is the potential of triggering negative emotions or worry about it, which is not supportive to healing. And you may even trigger conflict relapses, which will keep you in the loop of the program in a hanging healing. This is why we have to be also careful with affirmations, because we don't want to be focusing in on the problem too much, because we're still putting our focus on the problem. So as the healing phase relies upon vagatonia, which is a non-stress state, it's obviously then beneficial to reduce any stress, whether this be physical, emotional, mental, or otherwise, as much as possible. Therefore, all these tips in this section are aimed at reducing stress upon the body and mind. So first, we will look at physical stress, supporting the healing physically. So when you think of healing, think of moving through the symptoms and not away from them. I hope that makes sense. I mean, when I had symptoms, I would want to stop them. I'd want to be turning away from them. So you think that you're moving through them. Listen to what your body is saying to you. So if you're experiencing fatigue and extreme tiredness, your body's saying, I need this energy to heal, so you need to rest. Stiffness and pain can be a message to immobilize that area so healing can take place. I always advise people to only move within pain, because pain itself can become a trap then and cause a hanging healing. Support your health with a well-balanced, healthful diet of natural foods that is right for your healing program. And an example of this is where TB bacteria is involved. So night sweats are a really good indicator that tubercular bacteria are involved in healing. TB uses up an awful lot of protein, and if there is not sufficient protein available, it will use up body protein. Cachexia, or wasting away, which is often seen in cancer patients, is actually due to protein loss and not the cancer eating them away as it is believed. So it is really important to greatly increase protein at this time. Therefore, contrary to so much advice by people who do not understand this concept, it is not a good idea to go vegan or follow juicing fasts where there is a serious diagnosis or symptoms. And if you are vegan and suspect TB is involved in your healing, then you need to drastically increase protein, preferably eat a little bit of really good quality meat and fish, or at least some eggs, particularly in the first phase of healing. You need to avoid anything that has a stimulating effect, such as most medications. Limit caffeine, alcohol, and sugar, because these are all stimulating. And go for gentle exercise rather than intensive exercise. And just an additional note on medications. What medications will do, because most of them have a stimulating effect on our body, they will often put us back into conflict active. So there are no symptoms in conflict active. This gives the illusion that they're actually working and making us feel better, but they're actually keeping us locked into the program. And I'll give you an example, is putting cortisone cream on eczema, on an eczema rash. So you put the cream on, it has a stimulating effect, stops the healing, puts it back into conflict active where there is no rash. Then when you stop applying the cream, the rash comes back because it starts healing, and you put the cream on again. So you can see how medications like that can keep you in a hanging healing, or at least keep you in the loop of the program. This is how chronic disease is caused, by staying in the program. And it can also cause a more intensive healing phase. This also explains why invasive treatments such as chemo can sometimes make tumours grow quicker or increase in number, as the old brain programs have cell proliferation in the conflict active phase. So if chemo is extremely stimulating to the body, so if you're in an old brain program and the chemo puts you back into conflict active phase, then the tumours can increase in size because that's what happens in the conflict active phase. Does that make sense? If you're in the healing phase and you've got a curative tumor, stopping the tissue replenishment, and you're going back and getting more cell loss. So it's weakening the organ. So opt for foods that do not burden your body. And what I mean is whole foods as close as possible, as unnatural, artificial, and highly processed foods cause stress as they need more processing and digestion. Use supportive herbs and natural methods to keep exit pathways clear. And by exit pathways, I mean the lymphatic system, the bowel, the kidneys, and the liver. So with myself and clients, I have often used things like Essiac tea, which supports healthy lymphatic flow, because the lymphs help to remove metabolic waste and toxins. And coffee enemas clear the colon and also assist in cleansing the liver. Just a couple of examples. Maybe consider kinesiology or nutritional therapy to ensure your body is well balanced. In other words, there's no nutritional deficiencies or toxicities or parasite infection or anything like that that could be causing extra stress. Now, I deem this as absolutely essential. How can we expect our bodies to work and heal effectively if they do not have the correct building blocks? Deficiencies and toxicities and incorrect nutrition can cause stress, so it is crucial to make sure that we are balanced. Additionally, since I have been analysing hair mineral analysis tests, I've realised that we should only be taking supplements that we know that we need. Otherwise, we are just adding further processing on the body and for something it doesn't actually need. This will cause extra stress and wasted energy that could be used for healing. Adjust fluid intake accordingly. Now, we are often told to increase fluids when we are ill, but because there is inflammation in the first phase of healing, we do not want to be increasing fluids above what we need. We obviously don't want to be dehydrated, but we don't want to be increasing fluids above that, because all your body will do is add this fluid to the inflammation and make that worse. However, in the second phase of healing, increasing our fluids will help to flush out the waste. So it's a good thing then. So can you see how we're using the laws to work out what's supportive? So now we'll look at how we can support healing emotionally. So fear and stress need to be avoided as much as possible. And this is why, in my case with the lump in the breast, the stress, whether it was good or bad, slowed down and even stopped the healing. So first, you want to be avoiding anything that causes stress as much as possible, walking away from arguments, don't take on anyone else's drama, unfollow or block people on social media who bring you down. While you can't avoid family who do not understand GNM and may preach to you and fill you with fear, like saying you should be going to the doctors or whatever, understand that they are only doing it out of love and concern, and maybe make them feel useful and distract them with other jobs that they can feel helpful, like going to the shop for you or doing the hoovering or something like that. Keep a positive mindset and use positive affirmations. As I previously mentioned, these need to be carefully worded and not focusing on the issue, but general healing and gratitude. Supportive therapies will help the vagatonic state. And with this, I mean pampering things that make you feel really good, like gentle massage. You wouldn't want to go for a sports massage because that's stimulating to the body. Reflexology, maybe some mindfulness, meditation, Reiki, and exercising gently, such as yoga. not this hot yoga, not in the healing phase. This is really important. Getting support from family, friends, a Facebook group, if you haven't got family and friends who understand GNM, a therapist, preferably people who know, understand, or are at least open to GNM. Most healing is not nice. It can be really scary, especially at epicrisis when the anxiety comes back about the original conflict. So it's really beneficial to have support and guidance and bring logic when you may be emotional and starting to panic. That's why I'm so grateful I got Lloyd. So ease emotional stress with the following. Things that we've used that we found helpful are EFT tapping. Have you all heard of emotional freedom technique? That's where you sort of tap the meridian points. That's really useful. Meditation, mindfulness. Also, the emotion code is really good for, you might want to check that out for releasing, finding and releasing trapped emotions. I use that quite a lot. Though none of these can actually resolve a conflict, they are really good for alleviating stress and emotions. You can also change the perspective of your situation or your condition. And break the habits of negative inner thoughts and self-talk. So if it is a recurring problem or there is a relapse, you will need to identify the tracks or triggers. These are things that would be associated with the original conflict, and they may even remind you of the conflict. But these links are subconscious, so they may be very tenuous to your conscious awareness, and that is the tricky part. And they also may be very complex in long-standing conditions. So first we can look at what makes your symptoms better and what makes them worse. Remember thinking on your head to what you were thinking before, whereas usually you would want to avoid things that make symptoms worse. Now we are thinking that this is progressing the healing. And something that makes us better is likely to be triggering the conflict again. And that when we identify a track, we need to neutralize it. Sometimes just knowing the conflict and understanding the track can help us move forward into healing by bringing the subconscious into the conscious, as I already previously mentioned. But if that doesn't work, try having a good talk with yourself to explain that this is the past and will not happen again. And this is good to do in a mirror. You might feel silly, but there was actually a case study in the conference that used this technique, and it was like a lifelong allergy, really, really bad allergy to nuts. And it went just like after these few talks in the mirror. And if that doesn't work, we may need to do this under maybe hypnotherapy or meditation, or you could even use the psychological moment every morning or evening between being asleep and being awake. This is when we have access to our subconscious, and therefore it is the best time for this sort of work. Another great method you may want to check out is the silver method. This helps you to easily access your alpha brainwave with a 3-2-1 method. And there's some videos on YouTube on that. And there's also a website with some free lessons. We can also prove to ourselves that it won't happen again, a bit like facing the fear. Or we can create a positive association by changing our perception of the situation. Like I said, it can be tricky, which is why my feet are still not completely resolved. But hopefully your tracks are more like the top picture than the bottom. So when symptoms are uncomfortable, we can slow down the healing if it is severe. So we can use anti-inflammatories wisely. It's generally preferable to use natural anti-inflammatory products or substances so as not to add extra stress with side effects and artificial things. Cold applications or a cold compress is especially good for reducing inflammation. And also at epicrisis, if there is a headache, to put an ice pack to reduce the inflammation around the part of the brain that's healing. There was a case study where that saved somebody's life, wasn't it? So, that's a really important one. Hot saunas and hot baths, they actually have a stimulating effect on our body. So they will slow down the healing, which is why we often feel a lot better after we've had a hot bath. Herbal preparations and natural products as well that do certain things, just to sort of take the edge off things. Severe bacterial or fungal activity can be eased with natural antibiotics such as colloidal silver or a natural antifungal. But you just want to be careful because, you don't really want to be stopping the healing. So something to remember is that relief of symptoms doesn't always mean that what you're doing is promoting healing, as symptoms are healing. You do not want to stop symptoms or kill infections, just ease them. Slowing down the healing symptoms will lengthen the healing phase. That's also something to bear in mind. So, as I've said, these are just some suggestions based on our own and my clients' experiences that can help and are in line with the biological laws of nature. Once you have a firm understanding and appreciation of GNM and the 5 biological laws, you can use this knowledge as a basis for other methods and modalities that you are familiar with. And I will touch on this later too. So, can we actually prevent disease or cancer? Now, this is something we've researched and lived by this concept for many years. But now we need to look at this from a completely different perspective. The mainstream view is to prevent by early detection with routine screening. A non-invasive alternative that I opted for is thermal imaging or thermography. Whichever way it is done, early detection comes with many problems of its own. Now, this section is meant to give you food for thought and not to discourage you from routine screenings. While early detection and routine screening lose their value when you understand GNM, you just need to bear in mind the following points when you are deciding if you think it is right for you. In some cases, detection methods approached without fear and with the knowledge of GNM can actually be very useful. A shadow or lump or activity that is detected has the potential to cause a DHS, as it did with me. Looking at thermography, activity detected is deemed as potentially cancerous. This causes fear, but it means there is healing, which produces a lot of activity. Additional stress while awaiting further tests increases susceptibility to DHS and can possibly cause self-evaluation conflict, or something like the fear of diagnosis as well. We run biological programs very often without even realizing they are happening, or with minor healing symptoms that we do not attribute to disease. So the potential is here we could be picking up something that we might not even have known about. Routine screenings are fear-based and keep locked into fear. Some procedures can cause additional stress, such as biopsy, and it's really common that causes an attack complex. Remember that cells that are identified as cancerous or abnormal, just because they are different and growing, are purposefully different and growing, part of a biological program. So the alternative approach of prevention is to avoid the risk factors. And we'll look at some of the so-called risk factors that we associate with disease and cancer from the old way of thinking. And some of these Lloyd mentioned at the beginning. We've got poor diet, toxins, EMF and radiation, family history, heavy metals, smoking, alcohol, medication, stress, hormones. So let's have a rethink. Understanding the nature and meaningful purpose of cancer and disease, we can now see that it is not possible for these risk factors to be a direct cause of cancer or disease. However, they will disrupt the natural healing process and can cause complications. So obviously, I've looked at how things may not be supportive to healing. But let's look at the other ways that they can cause complications. So poor diet is lack of required nutrition to heal and recover. Toxins can cause physical stress and they may block exit pathways, such as aluminium from deodorants blocking the lymph. EMF and radiation cause stress and cell damage. Family history cause conflicts through fear or expectation. Heavy metals cause physical stress, cell damage, and may block exit pathways. Smoking creates toxins and causes cell damage and physical stress. Alcohol causes physical stress and lowers your mood and emotions. Medication, side effects can cause physical stress and they can be stimulating, as I've said. Stress will disrupt non-stress required for healing. Hormones, an imbalance can cause emotional or physical stress. So, as I mentioned, if there is anything in contrary to the phase that we are in, our body doesn't have the correct nutritional balance to cope with effectively carrying out the healing, we can hinder the progress of a biological program. So, this is important to realize, considering we are often in and out of biological programs without even knowing it. So, these things can actually cause those programs to be something that we do notice. So it is certainly beneficial to bear all this in mind, but now we have this new paradigm, we do not need to fear these so-called risk factors. And this is important. We need to be choosing through wisdom and not fear. As from the GNM perspective, we need to take care, as strictly avoiding risk factors through fear may actually cause us to experience the HSs. And this also has happened to me. I avoided sugar like the plague for years, with the firm belief that it fed cancer, to the extent that if I ate something accidentally with sugar in, I would swell up really badly. As soon as I realized that sugar does not actually cause cancer, yes, it feeds the cells, but it also feeds all of our cells. And the cells are only temporary anyway. The swelling stopped. So let's look at how our perception can influence our susceptibility to having a conflict. And here are just a few examples of things that we generally do for prevention from the fear perspective that can potentially make things worse for us. So not trusting your body, something is wrong, could cause self-evaluation conflicts, affecting the bones, lymphs, and muscles. Belief certain foods are bad could cause an indigestible morsel like I had. Fear of toxins could cause soiled or dirty conflict, which would affect the corium skin or other protective layers. I have no control over my health, it's in my genes. This could cause a powerless or frontal fear conflict. The pharyngeal ducts or thyroid are affected by those. Following a restrictive diet could trigger a starvation conflict, which affects the liver. The cold from someone sneezing could actually cause you to have a cold, a stink conflict. Additionally, routine screening, potential of various conflicts caused by a diagnosis of something that may have resolved and healed unnoticed, as I mentioned. So, if we can't prevent cancer and it is not necessarily beneficial to take the risk factors to extremes, then what can we do? Well, we can lessen the effect of conflict shocks and we can minimize the biological programs that our bodies run. And we can even lessen our susceptibility to having conflict shocks. I'll look at some of the ways we can do this. So I've mentioned briefly before, the severity of the symptoms and biological program are dependent on the intensity of the DHS, the length of the conflict active phase, and whether we are in harmony with the program or hindering it. Maybe we could prevent intense biological programs then by being emotionally flexible. So go in with the flow, be open to change, don't have like rigid things that have to happen, you know. You could even have a plan B to fall back on, because then if something doesn't work out, you're not going to stress it. changing our beliefs. One thing that I've mentioned is understanding ourselves through previous conflicts, to understand what presses our buttons and how we view things on a subconscious level. Understanding universal law. This is one of my favorites. Everything happens for a reason. Also, trusting in karma, because then you don't have to get angry at someone because you know they're going to get their comeuppance. See challenges as opportunities for your learning and growth. So when I look back, I don't think, oh, poor me, I've had this and that and the other. I just think I'm just so grateful that my body has given me all these things so I can learn from them. I wouldn't be here otherwise. I wouldn't have learned all of this really empowering stuff if it wasn't for my body putting me through the mill. Most importantly, recognize that you have experienced a DHS and work to resolve the conflict as quickly as possible. But without fear, don't panic about it. And we'll look at that last point. So a reminder of the symptoms of DHS and conflict active. So as you know, when you've had a DHS and when you may be conflict active. So the DHS is complete shock, isolating, dream world, time stands still. Conflict active phase, then you're going to be highly stressed, cold hands and feet, sleeplessness, worry, weak appetite. So when we know we've had a DHS, obviously the most effective resolution is a physical one. So for example, you fall out with somebody, you go and make it up with them. But if this cannot be physically resolved, then opt for a mental resolution. So you could see things from a different angle, change your perspective. This, such as I said, an opportunity to learn and grow. We can neutralize a negative association with the conflict. So if you recognize that you're viewing something negatively, just try and look at it from it's a bit like changing your perspective, but it's kind of like neutralizing it by bringing in a positive association with whatever's happening. And also moving forward positively towards working towards a solution. And this is what I think helped me, because I know I had a DHS when we had the very first trading standards raid, but I didn't recognize really any resolution. And I think it's because we sort of immediately started working towards a solution that I probably resolved it quite quickly and then didn't notice the resolution because it was just minor. And here's the important point. It is very important that longer standing conflicts, and especially to prevent an intense healing phase or epicrisis. And this is especially important in programs that involve the coronary vessel, as the epicrisis is a heart attack or an embolism, and also in programs where a stroke is involved too. So we'll move on to looking at other therapies and ways of helping others with GNM principles. And really this is a full presentation in itself, but I've just cutting this down to some points based upon my own experiences of revisiting my own therapy practice with the GNM perspective. So first, a reminder that you need to put everything you know on the shelf until you fully embrace and understand GNM, because otherwise you're just left with all these questions. So once you've had a firm understanding, review your therapy then from this new perspective, and be warned that some things may become irrelevant, but most things will just be used or understood differently. So an example is I did a whole nutrition course called Nutrition for Cancer Prevention and Longevity. I may as well just rip that up now. Always work from the new mindset of supporting the healing process rather than stopping symptoms. So you're working just from a different angle here. Make sure your advice and actions are always supporting healing if your client is in a biological program. So using your knowledge of GNM to decide when certain herbs, foods or supplements you use or techniques you offer are supportive and when they may hinder. And here are some examples. So in aromatherapy, for example, stimulating oils and stimulating massage are not good in the healing phase. They can also, in the conflict active phase, they can make the stress and anxiety worse as well. So they're not good anyway in the whole of the biological program. In kinesiology and energy healing, always ensuring that you ask energetic permission and asking when imbalances are found, is this a part of a meaningful process? If you work with the mind or emotions, practice with the awareness of GNM. For example, not fully resolving long-standing conflicts, not digging up old emotions or issues unless it's absolutely necessary, and being very careful when writing things like affirmations and hypnotherapy scripts to ensure that there are no triggers to old DHSs. You may also wish to hold hands with your client if they are stressed, because if their hands are cold, that's a good sign that they may be conflict active with what the problems that they're telling you about. And then you can use your GNM knowledge to help them to either resolve the conflict or to change their perspective of it. Build up your confidence with small minor cases before tackling serious ones, or you may feel overwhelmed. That's quite an important one. I find sessions that I have with clients who are open to an understanding of GNM really a lot more productive. So this is a way of explaining to clients, friends or family. It's obviously better that they embrace GNM because obviously I've said it's more productive and you can work through things together. But if they aren't ready, GNM can be passed on subtly without being obvious. So some things you might say is, there is another perspective if you want to hear it. Or do you think your car accident may have triggered your illness? We need to work through our symptoms to heal them rather than running away from them. Sometimes it will get worse before they get better. It just shows things are working. Use your symptoms to understand what your body needs. Pain is do not move, fatigue is you need rest. So it's like as if your symptoms are messages for you. So I'll now hand over to Lloyd.
Okay, so just one more recap, like some bullet points for you. So these 3 tips will ensure that if you are in a biological program, your body will be in the best condition for dealing with it effectively and as efficiently as possible and preventing recurring or chronic disease. Be emotionally flexible, go with the flow to reduce the likelihood of a DHS. Understanding that when you may experience the DHS and resolve it as quickly and stress-free as possible. Learning an energetic testing method, such as muscle testing, to make sure everything you do is in harmony with your body and the process it is in at the time. Maintain a healthy body and mind, avoid unnatural substances, keep exit pathways clear. Love and appreciate the wonder of your amazing body and realize that it is built for survival and not out to harm you. Trust in nature and the natural process and understand that everything exists in harmony with each other and not for each other's demise. Avoid toxic and negative people and situations. Give less energy to the things that don't matter. Let go of being offended. And keep a positive mindset, careful of inner talk and beliefs that do not serve you. That's quite an important one. So I'll just share some more general information. So this is a show we recorded with Richard. If we go to the Rich Planet website, many of you may have already seen this show, but we think it complements this presentation very well anyway. So it's on the Rich Planet website, and it's the Sacred Medicine Show. This is Daniel's website, and for further information, more articles on GNM. Obviously, I'm going to highly recommend their book, is the culmination of all her research into natural health, toxins therapies, body, mind and spirit, and so much more. It's now rewritten from the GNM perspective. It's in its 3rd edition. She extensively rewrote it once we discovered GNM. She's done it in such a way that explains the transformation from the old way of thinking into the new paradigm really well. And I think it should help people with the integration of GNM knowledge into their lives. There's also introductory articles on her website, as I said. That's the daniellebryant.co.uk one. And there's a therapy website as well, and she's also on Patreon and YouTube. And the learninggnm.com is the excellent website we highly recommend. Got the A to Z official tutorials. Caroline's got some videos on there that we mentioned. And Danielle has set up a UK, so it's GNM UK community on Facebook. So if you're not already a member, you're welcome to join that. But look specifically for that. And the image at the top is that sunset you can see in the background, just so you know you've got the right one. And that's the end of that section.